Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Guys, I am right now on cloud 9. I have 3 audiobooks. One is in production, one is in review, and one is finally on the market. The link to that audiobook, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, written by Tom Lyons, produced by Jeffrey Nadolny, is in the description below. It's going to be available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, I believe. Anyway, the link that I have is for Audible. That's in the description. Today I've got some amazing encounters to share with you. And I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm on cloud 9 like I said. Never would have thought this possible. I never in a million years would think that would have an audiobook out. Crazy. Anyway, on to the links and then on to the encounters. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, my PayPal, and my merch to help this channel to continue to grow and go. All of those links are in the description below. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fanfiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that, they just don't fit on this channel. Now, if that's anything that you're into, follow that link and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Now I've taken enough of your time. Let's get on with today's upload. Shall we? Today's first encounter, Tylor County, Texas. I went to the river camp in the afternoon at the end of October of '99 to fill my deer feeders. I had a late start and I was afraid I would get stuck in the bottom if it started raining, so I parked a half a mile or so from camp. There was a chance of rain in the area, which was good because it had been dry, but it doesn't take much for this area to get wet quick. I filled 2 2.5-gallon buckets with feed and took off walking down the road that leads past the first feeder. I noticed before I got to it that the feeder was missing. After a closer look, I found the feeder hanging in a tree. It had been wrapped around the limb that it was tied to, like a tetherball. The feeders we were using were made of 4-inch PVC drain pipe, about 2 feet long. The rope was about 10 feet long. I was thinking of climbing up the tree, or better of it, when I saw something move to my left. It was about 75 feet away and was hiding behind a large oak tree. I had seen it for just a second and thought I was seeing some strange-looking shaggy hog. As soon as I moved towards it, it started to move off. I followed it for a couple minutes in this fashion, but I could never get a good look. It was very good at keeping the brush and trees between it and myself. As this is in a place where the river overflows regularly, the runoff ends off in a slough. There is extensive amounts of dead tree, brush, and briar at all times. Sometimes it piles up so thick that it looks like beaver dams. I could only catch glimpses of it because of the thick cover. Because of its shaggy appearance, I had begun to believe it was an emu, or maybe 2. I know this sounds strange, but a couple of weeks earlier, a man in one of the hunting clubs up the road told me someone had emptied a cattle trail full of unwanted emu in their club, and I was convinced this is what I was looking at. We continued on this way, moving up the river. We came to the old railroad crossing at another camp house and boat ramp across the river. We were to the point where they either had to step into the open or go back the way they came, or turn and face me. When it stepped out, I really couldn't believe it at first. It was a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, woolly booger, or whatever you want to call it. There is nothing else it could have been. I was 50 feet away or less. The left side and back were to me, and I couldn't see its face. It was about 7 feet tall, walking upright, and covered with long, shaggy hair. It was longer in the arms. which hung to its knee and covered its hands. The hair was dark grayish black and reminded me of old hay rolls that had been left out in the pasture uncovered. It had huge, wide shoulders, and the head just sort of blended into them. I did not see any feet. I would estimate its weight to be 300 pounds, although it was large. I would have to describe it as lanky. As it moved over the bank, paused, and moved down to the river, out of sight. I noticed the hair on its rear end was thinner, and I could see its butt. It was black, and I could see the muscles working. The sight lasted about 10 seconds. By then, my hands were shaking from the adrenaline rush I was having. I haven't had a rush like that since I was a little boy about to take my first deer or try I missed. After I steadied myself, maybe 20 seconds or so, I decided to go see where this thing went. I figured it had crossed the river. You can walk across here easily when the river is down, and it was. I took about 10 steps, and a very loud snap came from directly behind me at about 200 feet. That's when I left. I went straight to my feeder, dumped the corn out onto the ground, and got the hell out of there. I was feeling flighty, to say the least. There is no doubt in my mind that when I started following this animal, it was on all fours. If at any time it would have been on 2 legs, 7 feet tall, I could have clearly seen it. It took full advantage of the thick cover. It didn't stand until it reached the opening of the river crossing. I've heard of the booger monster stories all my life, but never really believed them. I now realize this animal has been here all along. I've seen strange things in the woods I couldn't explain. Some of them don't seem so strange anymore. If I see it again, he can go his way and I'll go mine. Today's second encounter, Rusk County, Texas. One night in mid-October of '99, around 9:45, my daughter and I were coming home from Kilgore. I had my high beams on. Up ahead, I noticed something on the right side of the road. I continued to watch it as we got closer, and slowed down just a little because I was afraid it might be a dog or something and run out in front of us. As I got closer, I noticed that it was not a dog, but something much bigger. It appeared to be crouched over beside the road. It turned towards us and stood up. There is a steep drop-off on the shoulder of the road, and the thing just took about 2 steps and disappeared into the woods. I had started to tell my daughter to look, but caught myself short when the thing stood up and looked toward the car. I was dumbstruck. I had never seen anything like it. I just drove us home as fast as I could. My 8-year-old was asking me all the way, "What was that, Mommy?" All I could say is, I don't know. My husband could tell something was wrong when we got home because he told me I was as white as a sheet. The hair was still standing up on end on my arms. I decided to make this report after my oldest daughter came home last January, very upset and talking about a monkey man that had run in front of the car. I asked her to tell me where it had happened, and it was not a half a mile from where I seen my thing. Both of these locations are within 3 miles of our home. Today's third encounter, Grayson County, Texas. About 2 years ago, about 3 of my high school friends and I went to toilet paper a house that was about a quarter mile away. At the time, that was my nearest neighbor. We had to walk through a field to get there, and as we were going, some dogs started barking, so fearing we were going to be spotted by someone who wanted to see what the dogs were barking at, we instinctively ran for cover. Hay bales, the only cover you will generally find in most fields. As we sat there, the dogs stopped barking and began to kind of yelp, and an eerie silence came over the area, and we were already kind of spooked by the dogs. Not wanting to be spotted, we sat there and talked quietly behind these hay bales, and my dog Blackie starts pointing things on the tree line about 5 acres away, directly to my 12 o'clock position. She stares directly in that direction for about a minute or two, and then she kind of relaxes and then starts whimpering and scratching at me, as if she wants to go home or she's really scared. Just as I began to relax, she points to our 2 o'clock position for about the same amount of time, and then starts the whimpering thing again. And then, about 2 minutes later, our 3 o'clock position, or directly to my right. Seeing or hearing nothing myself, I didn't fear a thing. I just thought it was a coyote or a bobcat, common animals in my area. And then she starts whimpering a little louder and points out our 6. And just as she does, I hear something from behind us. Just a crack of a limb, a faint noise as if someone stepped on the limb or ran into a dead limb and knocked it off a tree. I couldn't see behind me because I had a hay bale to my back. I thought it might be just a cow that lived in the field we were in, and the same thing went on with the whimpering. I won't lie, I was starting to get scared. Me and my dog have been chased by longhorn and hogs, and hunted skunk, coyotes, and all kinds of other small varmints that roam Grayson County area. And she has never acted like this. So she points yet again at my 9 o'clock, right at this clearing directly to my left. And this strange musky smell comes over me, like a ghillie suit after you've worn it for a week and haven't cleaned the dung or other things out of it. It was a rancid musk only some large wild animal could make. I stare at this clearing, and I see 2 red eyes, and this tall, dark figure stand up, walking 2 steps and drop into the creek bed that runs through the tree line. I immediately stood up and got my ass the hell out of there. I was scared. No lie. I ran that half a mile in 2 minutes or less. When we all got back to my house, I asked my friends if they had seen or heard the same thing I did. And they all had the same story I did. Today's 4th encounter, Oklahoma County, Oklahoma. This is a story I have been reluctant to even think about. One night, me and 3 of my friends were in a storage shed located on the back of my friend's property, fetching some things we needed. We decided to head back to the house after we got what we came for, and I was left behind attempting to latch the door because it was very old and hard to get fastened properly. My 3 buddies had walked off at this time, leaving me to head towards the house. I was walking the exact same path they were taking, actually more of a faster trot, when I heard a noise like disturbed leaves to my left. Curiously startled, I stopped and looked in the direction of the noise, and there it was. Now, at this location, it happens to be at the back of a house, and there is a chain-link fence, and about 15 feet separating me and this creature. The thing I most remember is the size of this thing, and the silhouette of the creature head to neck and shoulders. Where a human has a visible neckline, what I witnessed had not. But I did notice huge shoulder muscles, too supernatural to be anyone I've seen. I didn't notice how dense the hair on the body of this creature was, so it could have added to the size of what I saw. I didn't mention this, but there was only moonlight for me to see this by. Also, this thing's abdomen was also tremendous, and in a well-defined V shape atop of curvy legs. I have read some other reports that a lot of people notice a pungent odor, but I did not, and I believe that there was only 15 feet between me and this creature. But what I did notice was a deep, deep breathing sound and then a deep growl rumble, like a cougar kind of intermittent, if that makes sense. And after that, it prompted me to slowly walk off out of the fear. This occurrence only took about 30 to 40 seconds, but I remember what I saw. I never mentioned this to anyone until about a year later when my friend had told me about something strange that happened in the woods near his property. Today's 5th encounter, Henderson County, Texas. It was dark, and my wife and son saw something cross the road in front of their van. This isn't a very heavily wooded road with no lights. My wife actually saw the form of the large animal walking upright and very tall, crossing the road. It seemed to be covered totally in hair. By the time my son looked up, he saw the creature peering at them from behind a tree. They said the eyes were approximately 7 to 8 feet high, wide apart and red. The head was very large and hairy. When the van came alongside the creature, my wife saw it walk toward the lake. She said that it seemed to walk right into the water and disappear. They were on their way to our new house that was under construction to turn the lights on for the night. Neither of them wanted to get out of there that night, so they went down the road a little further and turned around. They were both very upset with what they had seen. Today's sixth encounter, Henderson County, Texas. Just after dark, I decided to go to the park for some night fishing. I pulled over before I got to the lake to piss. I stepped just into the woods and began to take care of business. I then heard something walking through the woods towards me. I could hear the leaves crunching as it came my way, as if it was walking with heavy feet. I decided it would be a good idea to get out of there, so I started back toward my truck. Then the noise became louder, like jogging or running. I ran, jumped in the truck, and began driving. I watched in my rearview mirror, and all I could see was something big and dark standing on 2 legs, come into the road and behind me. I wasn't about to stop and see for sure what it was. Today's 7th encounter, Trinity County, Texas. While deer hunting in a box stand, I saw movement to my right. I turned to look and prepared to shoot. At first, I thought it was a deer. It moved again, and I realized its distance and size. It was further away and much larger than I first thought. Its size is why I thought it was close to me. But when it moved again, I saw it, looking straight at it, and not out of the corner of my eye. It is when I knew this was not a deer. It reminded me of someone behind a 4x8 sheet of plywood, standing on end, walking from tree to tree. The size was about the same, though, a little smaller, I think. I watched it for about an hour, and it stayed 75 to 100 yards away from me the whole time. It walked from one tree to another, and sometimes I would lose sight of it, as it would pass through small pine thickets. I couldn't judge its shape very well, due to the trees between me and it, but it was definitely walking upright. When it moved, it covered a lot of ground quickly, possibly from a long stride, though it never seemed to be in a hurry. Its movements also appeared to be well thought out and deliberate, as it moved from one semi-hiding place to another, like it was playing hide-and-seek. At some of the trees where it stopped, I could see it on both sides. I think now how funny it is, like a woolly mammoth hiding behind a toothpick. It basically circled me in this time and stayed about the same distance the whole while. I wish I would have had a scope on my gun to get a better look at this thing. I don't know what it was that I saw, but it must have known I was there. I don't know if I was in its path of travel, or it just went around me, or if it went around me out of curiosity. But it was very cautious of its distance and movements. It made no sounds, nor did it move any brush or limbs as it moved. I think it knew very well of what it was doing, but I don't know, it knew I could see it. After it had covered a half circle around me, it just disappeared. Also, in that same area, I used to find scrapes in the pine trees that were about 6 feet off the ground, and would be all the way around the tree. The trees would always be pines about 6 to 8 inches in diameter and about 15 feet tall. The scraped area would be about 1.5 feet up and down the tree. I've also seen these in Tylor County, much more. Today's 8th encounter, Saline County, Arkansas. Me and my friend were in the woods by my house hiking around when my friend fell and hurt his ankle. I wanted to see something up ahead, so I walked ahead real quick before we went back to the house, and he sits down. I walk about 50 feet, not quite out of sight for my friend, when this huge dog-like creature stands up. I see it and instantly turn to run. It starts chasing me. I finally catch up to where my friend was sitting, and I didn't have to tell him what I saw. He saw it, got up, and ran with me. We got out of the woods and turned around, and it was gone. No noise, nothing. We didn't bother telling anybody about this. Apparently, we both looked panicked because my mom asked what was wrong. We said nothing and went about our business. We both never forgot about it, though. Today's 9th encounter, Sanja Quinto, Texas. The weather was cool and sunny. There were thick woods on both sides of the road. On the passenger side, there was a dip for runoff on the property. It was fenced. The owner had longhorn on the property, but it was still pretty wooded. On the driver's side, there was a deeper runoff where the brush was real thick. There were downed trees on the edge and no fence. I was driving a '93 Saturn at the time. I'd let my daughter sit in the back with both of her friends, and they were laughing and talking, enjoying the last few minutes before I took them home 20 miles away. They were around 15 at the time, and I had to have them home by noon. That's why I remember the time. As I came out of the dip, the road curves to the passenger side, and before the road curves to the other side, I'm facing the road and looking into the thicket. And 60 to 80 feet from my car in the thicket, I see what I first thought was the haunches of a horse moving around. I could only see the top part. What I saw had grayish-black hair and was 6 to 7 feet tall. I then remember I saw a tail. As I go up the curve towards this thing, I start to look a little closer. This thing I thought was a horse turns around and crouches down, tries to hide behind a little tree. It's sitting there looking at me. It had a wolf-like face and grayish-black hair on top of its head. The reddish eyes followed me, and I drove within 15 to 20 feet of it. And I did see it crouching down, looking at me as I went by. Today's 10th and final encounter, Cass County, Texas. Myself and 3 of my friends experienced something that to this day we cannot explain. We were camping in the woods near my house after a day of playing paintball, capture the flag. Me and my friend Justin were on one team, and on the other was Greg and Jason. Me and Justin had been sleeping at our camp when I heard a loud sound. I looked up to see if Jason or Greg were coming to get us. When I looked, I saw a figure leaning out of the tree line. It was maybe 100 yards away. After that, the crashing noise got louder. Me and Justin got scared and went to find Jason and Greg. When we found them, they said they had heard it too. At light, we headed back to our camp. As we were getting our stuff, we heard this scream. It sounded like, "Ori!" We ran all the way home and hadn't been back since. Today's bonus encounter. I and one other person were in an area measuring and sampling rocks exposed near Cane Creek. We were geologists. Throughout that morning, farmers had been hunting on their land. As a result, we could hear sporadic gunfire all around us. After about 30 minutes to an hour, most of the gunfire ceased. Sometime later, as I worked, I heard a rustling sound behind me. Believing it to be some kind of animal coming towards us, I turned my head to see behind me. Immediately, I observed something hanging from a low branch over a bridge in the opposite bank of the creek. The first feature I noticed was an unusually long arms of this thing. Secondly, I noticed that it was covered in reddish-brown long hair. The creature was hanging from a low branch with its arms, much like an orangutan does. In fact, the hair and the way it hangs from the tree made me think of an orangutan. Also, for some reason, I seem to remember that the arms had less hair than the rest of its body. The entity that I saw was about 4 to 5 feet long, with about half of it being arm. The body was round and squat. I didn't notice legs or a head of the thing. The window of observation was about 10 to 15 seconds, although I can't be positive. Anyway, as soon as I noticed the thing, it dropped from the tree onto the ground. However, the presence of the bridge prevented me from seeing it hit the ground. But I do believe I heard further rustling sounds, although that was probably just my imagination. Afterward, I asked my companion if he saw or heard anything. Although he indicated that he might have heard something, he said he didn't see anything extraordinary. That meant I was the only witness. We didn't really search the area afterward for traces of the creature itself, since no unusual sounds or sights occurred after this. We felt that nothing would probably be revealed. However, I did have a vague temporary feeling that this thing was advancing towards us. Of course, considering the brief span of observation time, the distance about 200 to 300 feet from me, and the lack of additional evidence, I still can't be positive that what I saw was genuine. That happened in Muskogee County, Oklahoma. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed these encounters as much as I enjoyed sharing them with you. Victor has been MIA for the last couple of days. I know he's on a hunt. Hopefully he can come back soon and safe, and we can either do some more call-in Q&As, or I've got a couple of encounters that I'm going to ask him to share with us. Looking forward to that. Anyway, guys, I hope you guys had a lovely, enjoyable day. I did not until the end of the day, and I got that news. It's cold and snowy right now. 50 and sunny yesterday, cold and snowy today. Gotta love upstate New York. And I've got a nasty frog in my throat for some reason today. Anyway, guys, thanks for all the support, and have a great night.